So at this point, we cannot see you. My hope is that you can see us. This is my father. His name is Elwood Szczepanski, Dr. Szczepanski, like I said, taught at Santa Barbara City College, also taught at UC Santa Barbara, taught physics to the top physics students in, I can even say the California or the world. Like he has taught the best of the best. And on top of that, he is also a well-known bush pilot in Alaska. So he spent many years flying out in the furthest regions of Alaska where there are no roads, there are no cars that get out there. The only transportation in and out of a village would be an airplane flown by someone like him. And if there's an emergency, you have to be able to fix the plane yourself or wait out there and survive until someone comes out. So he has pushed the boundaries of flying and aviation and physics. And last year he came into our class to show us all sorts of cool things about exploring the world around you. And this year he will be back multiple times. He's one of last year's classroom favorites. Like Lila said, she enjoys listening to what he has to share over vocabulary jams, which is often ranked at the highest. And there we have it. So he's gonna present to you for a couple, about 10, 15, 20 minutes. And in that time, if you have a burning question, then Kathy and I will acknowledge that and we'll give him the question. He can't hear you right now, and I can't hear you, but Kathy and I will step in for that. So with...
now, before he leaves...
You can take your mask off.
I can take... Oh, thank you. Oh, that's what I look like. Before he leaves, I didn't think I would be able to sit here and watch you guys go through this half hour of my son communicating with you. And I have to say that it fits exactly into what I want to have to say. I could never do what my son does. I'm a college professor. I stand in front of 300 people, but he can talk to you and treat you as individuals, and that's what's so important. And that's why I'm here. And I'm sorry my voice is breaking up because it's important to me. So,
all right. Well, I appreciate that. All right. So in front of you is a bunch of stuff. He will hold it up. We'll bring the camera closer, but here we go.
Thank you for having me here today. And my purpose is twofold today. This is not a lesson, but it's more or less a commercial. Because there's two things that drive my life and the way I live my life. Excuse me, I'm a little bit sensitive today. By the way, I look like this because I've got a little medical problem that's weakening me. Sorry about that.
You're okay.
Okay, so here's what I want to present to you. There's two things that have happened. I'm 82 years old. I'm at least 70 years older than each of you, but 50 years ago, I chose to work with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And you're part of that group because you are the group of children or young adults that have finally grown up enough to control your lives and understand what you want out of life and work towards that, and I appreciate that greatly. So there's two things that have driven me throughout my life. And one of those things is changing now as a result of the iPhone and the computer thing. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But the two things are, if you can work with your hands, you can always get a job. Now, there was a time not many years ago where everybody had to go to college. That was the only thing to do. Well, that's not true. And even if you do go to college, you still need to be able to work with your hands. And that comes from me teaching college classes where students would all once start breaking things. They didn't have the manual dexterity developed to work with sensitive electronic apparatus. And that was because they were spending their time on keyboards and iPads and not giving themselves the opportunity, and it is an opportunity, to learn to work with your hands. So that's one thing. You'll notice everything I have here is something I've done with my hands. I love working with my hands. However, there's another thing that drives me throughout life, and that is basically maybe a reinterpretation of a biblical theme, and that is work for what you want, be happy with what you get. Now, you guys are in a situation now where you work to be in this classroom, standing, having a professor or a teacher stand in front of you and talk about what goes on in a normal classroom. That's what you work for. What did you get? You're sitting at home in front of a computer screen watching me talk to my son and You're having to learn. Well, as I sat there and listened to my son interact with you, I realized already there's something very good about that, because each of you had an opportunity to be an individual, to say something to the class, to say something to the teacher, and not be interrupted. There's always a rude kid in the class. I don't care what you say. Maybe not in this class, but there's always somebody that's going to disrupt you. And when you want to say something, you don't have the nerve to do it sometimes in front of a group of people. Now you can express yourself. That's what I mean when I say work for what you want, be happy with what you get. You now have an opportunity to be a part of your education that you've never had before, and I think that's important. So what I want to do today now, that's part of the commercial. What I want to do is point out to you how the world is changing. And I'm going to start from when I was about 3 years old. My parents were farm workers in Oklahoma, okay? My mother, my first experience of being out in a cotton field was riding on my mother's cotton sack as she pulled me down the rows, picking cotton and weighing it. They were laborers. We moved to California in 1946. I was 8 years old, and immediately they put me out in the fields with the Hispanics, picking up figs and working as a farm worker. My parents were still farm workers. Yo puedo hablar el español muy bien porque yo trabajé en el campo con mexicanos y es muy importante. Yo puedo hablar dos lenguas, es bueno. I speak 2 languages because I worked with braceros from 8 to 18. Did I know what I wanted to be? Heavens no. I thought that I would end up being at best a truck driver or maybe a carpenter. But here I am, Dr. Szczepanski. I'm also an airline transport pilot, and I'm also able to present what I know and have learned as a result of my experiences, and that's what's important to me. So here's what I want to point out to you. You guys grow up with stuff that you buy from the store. This is the first toy my father ever made for me when I was about 5 years old. This is from a spool of thread. This is a piece of soap here. There's a rubber band inside. You can wind this up, and out of that you have a tractor that moves. That's my first toy. Now that's not the one, but that's what my father made for me one day after I was complaining about not having any toys. So we made our toys. We didn't have any money. We had to make do with what we had, and that's part of working with your hands. That's the part of the beauty of it. The other thing that's probably not popular now, but this is a slingshot. Now, this is not the biblical slingshot that David and Goliath encountered, but this is one that I made, and it's kind that I've used all of my life. When I was a kid, my father always carried a slingshot, and he would shoot birds for us to eat for our meals. We were poor. Nowadays, this is a dangerous thing in general, and so we don't see people playing with them. But you can still go out to the store and buy them. What I want to communicate to you is that in places like Asia, China in particular, young kids will start shooting slingshots when they're 3 years old. And by the time they're 10 years old, they can shoot the top off of a Coke bottle without breaking the bottle. So it's used as a means of entertainment and manual dexterity, and it's a very valuable thing. We also did things that are not so popular now. We would make rubber band guns, but we couldn't get rubber bands. What did we do? We would go to the filling station, and the inner tubes during that time were made out of red rubber coming from Brazil, and we would make their own rubbers, and we would have cops and robbers fights. Nobody ever got hurt, but that's not maybe so appropriate now. What is more appropriate is that we can make papa guns out of simply a piece of plastic and a stick here. And the point is you can make things that make you happy. I've made dozens of bows and arrows. I make these for my friends here in Santa Barbara. This is made out of bamboo. One little girl told me, well, bamboo's not a wood, it's a grass. And she's right. And she learned that off of YouTube. And that was the benefit of the iPad that she had. So I make these just for the fun of it, because anywhere in Santa Barbara you can find these large bamboo pieces of bamboo. You can cut them up, you can make a bow and arrow. I make chopsticks. These aren't completed, but if you want to have real Chinese chopsticks, here they are. So I'm what's called a cheapskate, you know, but that's not really true. I prefer to make my own things and to have that lovely experience. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. And here's kind of why I'm here. I would like to see you push your limits to using things and making things, because you're spending more time at home now. You have a chance to do things with your parents, and parental child involvement in making things is a wonderful thing. In particular, I have made about 20 videos that have to do with basic science, and all of the equipment is stuff that comes from my garage. It's not some fancy lab at the university. It's all basic science, like this battery, like these wires, like this wire, like this little magnet. I make things out of stuff in my garage so that you look at it and you say, oh, that's familiar, I know what that is. And that's what I would encourage you to do. So here's an example of something you can do. I get an old junky piece of wire that somebody's thrown out. Okay, this happens to be magnet wire. It's got shellac on it. And out of that, I can make a motor.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yep.
I'm interrupting so that you pay attention to this, because this is like one of the coolest things that I've seen him do. So this is stuff has in his garage, and he's making stuff that works, that is mind-blowing. So I had to pause to just pay attention to this, because this is cool.
Okay, so what this is, and you have to have a little bit of science knowledge to make this, but all this is a 12-volt battery. These are all pieces of wire, so they'll conduct electricity. Here's a magnet down here, and the physics of this is very fascinating, and that is that anytime you have a moving piece of wire that has electrons in it, in a magnetic field, it'll feel a force. And there's the magnet turning. It's rotating as a result of the interaction between the current coming from the battery and the magnetic field. If I take the magnetic field away, it comes to a stop eventually. Okay, it takes a while. So this is the kind of stuff that I appreciate you reading about, going to YouTube, finding out how to do it. Now, the other thing that I want to present to you is something that I made in 1961. This is when I was a graduate student at UCSB, and this is a circuit board with an audio amplifier capability. I made this to listen to the music off of an FM tuner that I made. And I want you to know, this is part of why I'm here. This is what that little bud in your ears looked like in 1961. This is as small as we could get it. Now we can take all of this stuff and put it in a little package the size of my fingertip, and you can stick it in your ear. So the point of this is, in the 70 years that has taken place, technology has changed so much that it's impossible for me to keep up with it. Certainly for you to look to the future and decide how things are going to be is almost impossible. So you have to have the right idea about what education is. And that idea is you work for what you want. Okay, I wanted to be a truck driver. My teacher said, no, you don't want to be a truck driver. You want to be a physics student because you got a brain. I didn't know that. My dad didn't tell me that. And so I followed my teacher's advice. I went to school. I got a master's degree, got a PhD. My life has changed. You won't know until you reach those turning points what you actually want to be, and you want to be able to take advantage of anything that comes along. So that's part of what I'm trying to communicate to you. So I taught for 35 years at Santa Barbara City College, a little while at the university, retired, and I've always wanted to be a pilot. In fact, I took my first airplane ride out of a cow pasture in Corn, Oklahoma in a Piper Cub. And I was 6 years old. I've never forgotten the experience. I knew that someday I had to be a pilot. It took one of my professors at UCSB to introduce me to an instructor in Santa Paula, and he helped me get my license, get rated as a result of a teacher, again, being able to help me. So I left Santa Barbara City College. I moved to Talkeetna, Alaska. And I've been landing on glaciers. I've been in every part of Alaska. I have made physics demonstrations in the villages along the Yukon River. I go to Ruby, Alaska, and I'll do a presentation like I'm doing sort of for you now. And the kids are just like you. They want to learn. They're 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. They want to learn, and of course immediately have better ideas than me. I showed them how to collapse a can once using atmospheric pressure. Immediately they wanted to go out and get a 55-gallon barrel and do the same thing. Well, we didn't do it. Okay, so here is the business now about working with your hands. All of these things I make, and I started doing most of this when I was in Alaska, because in Alaska the weather is so bad that sometimes for many hours you can't go flying. You have to sit on the ground and do something that will entertain you. A lot of the pilots will sit around and drink coffee. I like to work with my hands, so I started making things. And the kind of stuff that I make is always from what is available to me on site. These are little bracelets that are made out of birch bark. Birch bark is everywhere. If I need a knife, I make the knife. If I need a sheath, I make the sheath. If the Eskimos need an ulu, this is an ulu, which is a knife used for cutting blubber on fish and whales. And I make these and sell them to the Eskimos because they don't have the technology. They kind of lost their ability to do this. So they'll pay me $75 for an ulu. When I was in Vietnam, they were cutting fish with this kind of a knife. Well, I can make a knife like that, so I make myself a Vietnamese knife cutting knife, and I use it. If I need a mallet, I make my own. But most importantly, in a physics class, we talk about things that get a little bit technical. You'll be surprised at how much physics you know without knowing the words to talk about it. If you can walk, if you can jump, if you can run, you're using physics. If you can see the different colors of the light in a spectroscope, you're using physics. You know a lot of physics, but many people become, maybe not afraid, but they become disinterested because physics does require eventually some math. You can all understand the ideas, but eventually the technicalities drive some people away, and that's okay. Just as Steve said earlier, you all are a genius in some area. You can't all be a physicist. You can't all be an artist. You all can't all be a pianist. But you can do something that makes you feel good about yourself. So I make these tops, and it's kind of interesting to me. If I go to Mexico with these tops, and I go a lot, then every little kid can grab this top. It's called a trompo, and he can grab it and he can spin it. And if I bring it to a class here, like your class, if I ever see you, maybe one or two of you will be able to spin it because you've grown up affluent enough, that is, you've had enough money to buy the special things that don't require all of this manual dexterity. But on the other hand, these kids then can do things with their hands that you can't do, and that's what I'm trying to promote. If I'm in Cold Bay, Alaska, and I'm sitting in bad weather, and there's a bunch of floats from fish nets sitting around, I'll grab them and I'll carve little faces just for the heck of it. Okay? What happened? Okay. And if I'm on the beach and I see a killer whale, that's a tooth from a killer whale.
Can you hold that one up again?
Here's a small tooth from a killer whale. Somebody had already gotten the big teeth. But you can use these teeth to make rings, to make jewelry. I'll show you that in a minute. I bet there's no way that you can guess what this is. This is a toe from a walrus, a finger from a walrus. A walrus has a finger just like you, but it's covered with skin, and that's its flipper. Okay? And a lot of times in Alaska, I find this very amusing because a lot of times in Alaska, people will run around with a bear claw on their neck. Well, this is a moose toe. I wear a moose toe. If I want to walk downtown and tell Keaton and make fun of people, I'll wear my moose toe. But this came from the toe of a moose. Well, how could that be? Well, here is the fingernail. And this toe comes out of here. So it's just like the finger on your hand, except your fingernail has turned into a hoof. And I like to know about these things. I like to know the background, the biology, the physics, and all. And then besides that, each one of these hooves makes beautiful jewelry. It polishes up like magic. These little seeds, none of you will know what this is. These are little colored seeds that come out of a gizzard of a ptarmigan. When I shoot a ptarmigan to eat, I clean the gizzard, and then these bright little beads have been turned blue from the blueberries they've been eating. Well, I find that kind of stuff fascinating, so I spend time with it. And finally, when I have plenty of bone, and you can get that from the antlers or the horns from moose or caribou, then if I'm sitting around with not much else to do, I like to make jewelry. I like to make things for my wife, for my kids, for my friends, and a lot of times I'll sell it, and because that's another way for me to make a little extra money. If I want to tell somebody I love them, I make them a heart, give them a heart. And if I just want to make a belt buckle, I can put it in a moose antler and inlay it. So that's kind of my story. I really look forward to working with you guys if you'd like. What I would like, I don't get paid for this, I do it because it makes me happy. But if you have the time, write me a little letter and tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are and what you like to do. That's my reward for being here. And if you ever want to trade me anything, if you're an artist or if you make things on your own and you want to trade something, well, maybe we can make a deal. Thank you for having me here. It's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to you guys having a wonderful year. Work for what you want. Be happy with what you get.